Hi, Fee here. In today's video, I'm actually going to make another video after this about emotions in narcissists and about the crying thing. But I'll get into that after this. But I did want to make a quick video first because something came up in a comment on my video titled Empathy, What's That? Where I talked about my mother's non-empathic, non-caring, bizarre reactions to two incidents that happened. The first being when I was hit by another bike when I was on my bike when I was a teenager, and the second when I was involved in a car accident in my mid-20s. And I had been thinking about that because when I was telling the story in the video about the bike situation, I had pretty much blocked out or forgotten or whatever a lot of the conversation that I had with my mother when I got home after the bike accident. And I remembered parts of it, but then as I was telling the story, I remembered that this teacher from my old primary school that I used to go to had seen me. She saw me just after the impact. So she's driving in her car and she sees me lying face down on the road. And I guess she thought, holy crap, the kid's been hit by a car. She called my mother and she told my mother, I think Fiona's been hit by a car. And I was helped off the road by a passing driver who stopped their car to help me. I realised that I couldn't ride my bike anywhere because it was buckled and bent. So I pushed my bike home and I got home. And one of the things she said, well, what are you doing here? What happened? I thought you got hit by a car. And in that video, I said, I think maybe she was annoyed that she had the wrong information or something like that. But a commenter, long-time subscriber, commented, and I was going through the comments last night and saw this comment, and I really appreciate it, and you'll know who you are. This commenter said, what they did was they offered me an alternative explanation for her seeming annoyance. And it wasn't that she was annoyed at having the wrong information. What this commenter proposed was that my mother was annoyed that I hadn't been hit by a car. And when I read this, my stomach sunk a little. To be honest, I felt a little nauseated. I went and made a cup of tea, and I had to think about it. And as disturbing as it is, it fits. It really does fit. And there is a good chance that this commenter is right, or at least onto something. So I guess because the weird thing about this situation and what had sort of come to me in a revelation when I was making the video was that my mother had received this phone call to say, your daughter has been hit by a car. She knew the intersection it would have been at. I'm sure she would have been told by the caller, the teacher. And when I got home 20-30 minutes later, she was still there at home, just hanging out, just chilling at the house. And she didn't come to look for me. She didn't look slightly concerned. She looked kind of irritated. When I walked in, this didn't go according to plan. And what was she doing at home? Was she waiting for a call from the hospital to say, we have your daughter here, she's been hit by a car? But my mother already knew. But she didn't come to find me. I can only imagine if it was one of my kids. If I was in my mother's position and one of my kids had been hit by a car, I got a call to say they've been hit by a car, I would be down there so fast, my feet would hardly touch the ground. But no, she was just hanging out. Yeah, so this idea that maybe in her mind, she thought, okay, so she's been hit by a car. I'll just wait for the ambulance or the hospital to call me, and we'll see what happens. And then when I walk in the door, it's pretty obvious that I'm not seriously injured. I mean, I'm not catastrophically injured. My limbs are intact, my faculties are intact, and there was a confusion in her. Well, I thought you got hit by a car. Well, no, I didn't. It was a bicycle. It was a bike. And then onto a dismissive kind of smirking, almost disgust, like, all right, well, I guess you have to stay home. And it was as though she had been disappointed. When I really think about it, it was like she was disappointed. And I've talked before about how my mother used to work through her line of work. She worked with people with brain injuries, people with severe to profound brain injuries who were in persistent vegetative states, semi-comatose. Many couldn't even swallow on their own. They would dribble, they couldn't feed themselves, they couldn't sit up, they couldn't communicate at all. And she did some work in the hospitals with patients with severe to profound brain injury. And she had also worked with my friend who at age 11 suffered a brain injury due to an encephalitis type brain infection. And I talked about my friend in the video, Your Friend is Dead. I'll link to that in the description. And my friend was in a persistent vegetative state for 4 years until she died, from age 11 to age 15. And my mother used to go along to her house once my friend had been brought home. I mean, she was in a hospital bed at home because she couldn't sit up, she couldn't communicate, she rarely opened her eyes. But my mother would insist that I would go along with her. And it was very uncomfortable and it was very distressing for me as a young, very, young teenager to see my friend in that condition. But see, my mother got so much supply. She got narcissistic supply from working with these helpless people. But particularly, she got narcissistic supply from the interaction she had with the family and the way they would look to her for information, and look to her for reassurance. And she felt in a position of power and control. And I wonder if she had thought, if I had been hit by a car, maybe I would be brain injured. And maybe she would have a permanent source of supply. Like I said, I felt pretty sick to my stomach when I thought about it last night, but I do appreciate the commenters' different perspective, because it definitely added a whole new layer to the whole, that entire scenario. So, and I think, as sickening as it is, this idea that my mother was a little bit tickled that I might have been hit by a car, and then was disappointed and kind of irritated and annoyed when I walked in the door. Oh, I guess you weren't hit by a car. And whether she was thinking, bummer. The liberation in that and the freedom in that is that it's another sign, another clear sign that this is not about me. This is about her. This is about her mental dysfunction, her personality disorder, her insanity. She teeters on the edge between sanity and insanity. And I think something I hadn't mentioned before, I didn't actually know this until maybe 2 years ago, that my mother's paternal grandmother was institutionalized in a mental asylum when she was an adult. And I have asked my mother a couple of times to tell me about that. She won't talk about it. She changes the subject. She gets very irritated at, how very dare you ask me such a question. She will not discuss it. Why her paternal grandmother was institutionalized in a psychiatric, back then it was called a mental asylum. So yeah, with the whole picture there, it adds, it's reassuring that, look, this woman is not well. She's a sick, disturbed woman. No sane mother, no real mother treats their daughter like that, and dismisses and neglects their daughter like that, and abuses their daughter like that. And it just reminds me that it's not me. This isn't about me. This is about her. This was never about me. This was never my fault. And I could have been born with any personality, any temperament, looking any way. I could have been born with any set of interests, preferences, and she still would have treated me this way. This wasn't about a flaw in me. I was never broken. So I just thought I'd make that video, and I will talk to you guys soon. I hope you're having a great day. Bye.